Hello and welcome to the Talking Music Podcast, where we, you guessed it, talk about music. I'm Josh Ferguson, and as always, I am joined with Connor Bryant. How are you doing today, Connor? Good. Connor? You there, Connor? Hello? Oh. He's not here. That's interesting. Well then, this episode is going to be slightly different. Okay. Right. Stay in your seats. Calm down, people. This is not an emergency. Everything's okay. As I said in the intro, this episode is going to be slightly different. So if you're familiar with the podcast, you'll know that me and Connor sit down and talk about two records that we've both recommended to each other, and then discuss, argue, cry over those records. Unfortunately, our schedules for this week have not aligned, so we've been unable to sit down and record a new episode of the Talking Music Podcast. But we didn't want to leave you without an episode for this week, because we're dedicated. We're dedicated podcasters who want to provide content every single week because we care. So I know what you're thinking. How are you going to record a new episode for this week if you're not together? And what are you going to talk about in this new episode? So the idea we've got for this episode is we're going to do a very classic style of album review roundup, where we just collect a bunch of albums we've listened to over the past month and discuss those albums. And we're just going to discuss them individually, because obviously me and Connor, we have similar but differing tastes. So I listen to a lot of albums he doesn't listen to. He checks out a lot of bands and artists that I just can't be asked to listen to be honest. So for this episode, we're individually going to be recording our thoughts on the albums we've listened to over the past few weeks. And we hope to do this every month, every 2 months, just to keep you up to date with what we've been listening to. Because obviously the albums we talk about on the Talking Music Podcast are not the only albums we've been listening to. We listen to a lot of other music than just Kero Kero Bonito and Sean Kingston, for instance. So in this short roundup, I'm going to be talking about a bunch of albums that hopefully you may not have heard of, albums you may have checked out, you just want my thoughts on, and let's just see how it goes. So I'm going to do my roundup first, and then halfway through the episode, once I'm done, I'm going to pass it on to Connor, and he will talk about the albums he's been listening to over the past month. And unfortunately, there is a bunch of music I listened to this month that I just haven't been too enamored with. There's some albums here that I liked, but just not, I haven't been amazed by anything this month, besides one record, which I'll get into later on. So yeah, some of the records I've been listening to, like I said, I just haven't been amazed by them, but I've liked them. I haven't been too impressed by them. I've been kind of meh on them, honestly. So records like the new Street Sex album, The Kicking Mule. I've also listened to the new Mick Jenkins record. Oh god, that Mick Jenkins record was so boring, honestly. It was so bland and pretentious. Honestly, and this is coming from a fan of The Waters, which I think is an amazing mixtape. But everything he's done since then has been just awful. I mean, it's not awful as in like this is the worst music ever made, but it's just criminally boring, and I think that's the worst sin a rap album can make, you know? A rap album that's meant to be conscious and smart, it just comes across as just like really tedious and a bore, to be honest. Like, I just feel like he's lecturing me about stuff I do not care about, you know, and not even lecturing me about stuff I should care about either, you know. If I should care about it, he doesn't give me the motivation to care about it. With some very lackluster beats, some very repetitive flows, and just really boring lyrics. You know, I didn't really pick up any interesting couplets. interesting similes or anything really. There wasn't that many sticky hooks to catch on to, and again, a lot of the beats were lifeless, besides the two Keiichinada beats on here, which, is a given, because Keiichinada is a really good producer. But everything other than that is, like I said, boring, and I think that's the worst sin an album can make. And yeah, the new Street Sex record I thought was pretty solid. I didn't love it as much as I wanted to, because it is definitely a change of pace from their first record, which is utterly pummeling and just so blitzing in its sound and its fury. This new record is definitely a lot calmer, more accessible, a lot poppier, I would say. There's a lot of catchy elements to this, a lot of catchy riffs, catchy hooks. Definitely a lot of stuff in here that I was repeating in my head, just as even when I wasn't listening to the record, like, oh yeah, that bit stuck with me. But as a whole experience, a lot of it was unfortunately kind of forgettable, and because of its change of pace, it unfortunately suffered from that sophomore slump. Because the End Position, the debut record, made such a splash and made such an impression that I think anything they did after that would have been seen as a disappointment. Because you couldn't really get more extreme while still maintaining a sense of melody than what they did on End Position. So I think it was very wise of them to go in a different direction. It just unfortunately wasn't as exciting as one might have hoped. But I still think it's a very solid goth rock, very solid post-punk. I wasn't blown away by it, unfortunately. But I could definitely see why people do enjoy it, though. Other than that, I also listened to the new Daughters record, You Won't Get What You Want, and this album has been praised to fuck, right? I've seen a lot of 10 out of 10 reviews on it, 9 out of 10 reviews on it, people saying it's the album of the year, album of the decade, album of the century. I'm sure some person out there is saying it. And honestly, I don't want to say I don't see the hype, because I do see the hype. I do see why people love this record. Me personally, I just think it's good. And I'm very sorry to disappoint you if you love this record. But this doesn't affect me physically in the same way it's affecting other people, or even in the same way the self-titled record affected me. Because the self-titled record is so heavy. It is unlike anything I've listened to. Maybe Dillinger Escape Plan is the closest resemblance I can think of, just in its pure chaos. But this new record, although it is very well produced, very well made, and the atmosphere is definitely there, and just everyone's on their A game, it just doesn't affect me physically. And I'd want that from a noise rock record. I don't want to be sitting still when listening to a noise rock record. And unfortunately, I do find myself just sitting still whenever I listen to this. I am not moving to this record. Oh, I'm not scared by this record. I just think it's an easy listen. You could say what you want about me and like how fucked up that may be. It's like, how can you think this record's easy? But honestly, yeah, I maybe it was my expectations, because I listened to the self-titled record before this new record and I expected something a little bit more. But honestly, I think it's just good. I don't think it's amazing. People saying it's album of the year, I can see why they say that, but for me, this is nowhere near my top 10, nowhere near my top 20 even. I think it's a little bit too far for me to say I'm disappointed in the record, but I still think it's good. There's some amazing elements in this record, and the song Less Sex, like the bass on that song is subterranean. It's so low down, it's so dirgy, kind of sickening, to be honest. It's so just, and yeah, the wailing guitar on the bridge of that song is fantastic. The high string guitar, or like the piano on Satan and the Wait, is beautiful. The first time I heard that, I was like, oh my fucking god, this is transcendent. Like, this is transcendental, On Long Road, No Turns, I believe is the name of it. It's like, a little is all it takes, a little is all it takes. So good. Like I said, the atmosphere is there. and it's palpable. As a whole project, it doesn't wrap me up in the same way. It's wrapping up other people. I want to be invested in this darkness and in this hellscape, but unfortunately, I'm still on planet Earth. I'm not seeing fire and brimstone. I'm just seeing a really dark shadow. I think is the best way I can put this record. I still enjoyed it. It's definitely an enjoyable listen. I just didn't love it. But if you love this record, hats off to you. I'm glad Daughters have been getting recognition that they thoroughly deserved. Especially after so long without making music. I think it's like this is their first record since that self-titled record. So that was 8 years ago. So it's been a long time since they've been a band, and I'm very, very happy for them for their newfound acclaim and newfound notoriety. But if you haven't listened to the self-titled, if this is the only Daughters album you listen to, then definitely check out the self-titled. But yeah, for me, this new record was just good. I'd give it a 7 out of 10 if I had to rate it. But it's nowhere near 10 out of 10 material for me, unfortunately. But I still thought it was good. So, other than that, there wasn't that many records that impressed me or I just thought were worth returning to. Other than the new Sun Kill Moon record. This Is My Dinner. Now, if you're familiar with Sun Kill Moon, you either love him or you fucking hate him, no matter what. And me personally, I fall in the I love the fuck out of him camp. I believe Mark Kozelek is one of the most interesting singer-songwriters in the industry right now. And that is for a few reasons, which I'll divulge into as I talk about this new record, because I do believe this new record, while it may not be one of his best or like his standout achievement in his discography, I do believe this is a very special moment in his discography and in his career, and is absolutely the watermark of the highest watermark of this evolution he has been on within the last 4 or 5 years. So, if you're unfamiliar with Sun Kill Moon and Mark Kozelek, I'll do a brief summary of what this man is about, because he has lived a very interesting life over the last 20-30 years. So, he fronted Red House Painters in the early 90s to the late 90s, early 2000s. Everyone knows that. Everyone's familiar with Red House Painters. Then once Red House Painters dissolved, Sun Kill Moon was born, and Ghost of the Great Highway was released in 2003. And I actually listened to Ghost of the Great Highway for the first time very recently because of this new record. I fell in love with This Is My Dinner so much. I just felt compelled to check out the rest of his stuff. Because I'm very interested in the mythos of Mark Kozelek. I'm just fascinated with him at the minute. Almost to a very obsessive level. But anyway, I listened to Ghost of the Great Highway for the first time, and I loved it. I well and truly loved it. This was definitely a very different side of Mark Kozelek than what I'm used to, because I've only really listened to the later records, Benji onwards, really. Because for me, and for a lot of people, Benji was their entry point to Sun Kill Moon and Mark Kozelek. So delving back into a discography where he sounds a lot happier, a lot more full of life, and just less bitter, it was really refreshing, but still beautiful and still full of melancholy. Songs like Carry Me Ohio, Dakku Kim, Lillian Parrots is scorching. Gentle Moon is wonderful. It's just one of those records that I think is timeless, it's transcendental, and it's definitely a high point in his discography, and I think many people will agree with me when I say that. So I'm very glad I delved back into his discography to listen to this record, because it is fantastic. It's such an amazing record. But I also listened to his other early albums. I also listened to April. Oh my fucking god, April was even better. I loved April. April is wonderful. just the really long passages of acoustic guitar. Mark's voice on the record is more gorgeous than ever. He conveys so much emotion on that record. And the instrumental palette on that record is varied but still consistent. And on Tonight in Bilbao or Bilbao, I have no idea how to pronounce it. Like the end guitar passage on that song, it sounds very Modest Mouse, and obviously we know Mark Kozlik is a big Modest Mouse fan because he made a whole album on Modest Mouse covers. So it was just very surreal and very interesting to see that similarity and that influence played out so vividly. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous record, and the only thing I hate about it is it's £150 on vinyl. It's just really hard to get. But I loved April so much, and Goes to the Great Highway is fantastic as well. But the main album I want to talk about today is This Is My Dinner, his latest record. And now I have the context of his early records, I can definitely see the divide. Fans of Goes to the Great Highway in April and even Among the Leaves, and Red House Painters as well, they expect something out of Mark than what Mark is willing to give them in 2018. Mark has reached the point in his career where he just does whatever the fuck he wants to do and doesn't give a shit about what anyone else thinks. So his long-term fans, his die-hard fans from the early 2000s, all they want from him is just to return to that old style of singing and songwriting. They want the emotion, they want the melancholy, and they want sensible song structures and just meaningful lyrics, right? And, to an extent, I like that too. It was, considering how great his early records are, it would be nice for him to return to that style, because he's really good at that style. But I think those fans are missing the point when it comes to his new work. One of the biggest critiques of his latest albums, especially this new one, is that he is just an old man rambling about whatever comes to his head. And I can see where people would get that impression from, because he does talk about a lot of stuff that is very mundane, is very boring in the grand scheme of things. He's not contemplating philosophy, he's not contemplating life or death or anything like that. He's literally talking about tagliatelle on one song, and how he wants more tagliatelle, but the chef won't provide him the tagliatelle because they just can't. It's not possible. So for some people, it's just like, why the fuck are you complaining about not getting any tagliatelle? Just shut the fuck up. You're such a curmudgeonly old man. But the way I see it, and the way I see this album, which is, in a sense, a travelogue. This is an account of Mark Kozelek's European tour in 2017, and just his stories on the road, traveling. His level of detail in these very minutiae level stories, I believe, is fascinating, and it may not mean anything. It may not have any metaphorical significance, but for me, a songwriter that's so invested in the everyday details of life, I think is worthy of appreciation. And another critique that Mark gets on his music is that he's only singing about himself and just looking down on the audience and speaking from a aloof position. And I don't really see that either. Sure, Mark is a bit of an arsehole, he is a bit of a curmudgeon, but I don't think he's just singing about himself. And I think the album title is actually a perfect symbol of this album at its heart, because when you read the album title, This Is My Dinner, you expect an old man to be rambling on about what he has for dinner. This is my dinner. It's a chicken breast with noodles and carrots and sweet corn, right? And he expects you to be interested in what he is saying. That is not the case, though. Really, what this album is referring to in that album title is a woman that Mark met on tour who was so miserable and so down on her luck that they had a heart-to-heart in the late evening, early morning, and she whipped out a Snickers bar and said to Mark, "I'm so broke, this is my dinner." And all of a sudden, that phrase is completely switched. So on a surface level, you see that as 2009 Twitter personified, right? Or 2011 Instagram personified. It's like, here's my dinner. Look how interesting I am. Oh, please give a shit about me. But really, Mark is singing about someone suffering. He is singing about his interaction with someone who is going through a hard time. So although he may be singing from his perspective, he is singing about other people and the stories that they hold. Because everyone has a story. And I believe Mark Kozelek has realized that, and he wants to capture that in his music. That's not to say he doesn't sing about himself or his personal experiences from time to time. On the title track, "This Is My Dinner," he does sing about his dying cat, who, when he was on tour, he got a call saying his cat was dying, and he wanted to say goodbye to the cat before it died. So he got a plane back home, and on the plane, he's just thinking about, please don't die, please don't die, please don't die before I get there. He's just worrying about his cat. And then, as soon as he gets home, he's too late. The cat's already dead. So something simple as that. It's not like a loved one. It's not his mum or his dad. It's a cat. But you still feel the emotion. And that's just one moment in one song. The song is very dense in its lyricism. And I think that's another element that I appreciate out of his new work, is that I get so much from one single song. It's like 3 short stories in a single tune, right? And as a writing student, or as a previous writing student, I've graduated now, but someone that reads and someone that writes, it's just something that I can invest myself into. I can just delve into the lyrics, listen to what Mark is singing about, and just appreciate it, and just like fully immerse myself in the world Mark is creating for us, because I definitely get a full sense of who Mark is on this album. He's very, very personal on this record, more personal than he's ever been, I believe, because he's not as concerned with metaphors or symbolism or anything like that. He's just telling it like it is. It's very diary form, very stream of consciousness, and there is an inner beauty to that, I believe. His dedication to capturing the mundane reality of life, this non-romantic portrayal of our day-to-day lives, I think is to be appreciated, and I think is to be commemorated as well. On the song "Soap for Joyful Hands," Mark puts it very, very beautifully in his lyrics, where in a passage he sings, "For me, that's what life's all about, and I even love the routine stuff, the day-to-day, day. I find poetry in the day-to-day. I find it in the emptiest, loneliest, most boring, uneventful days. But it's the curveballs that hit us out of nowhere that make us say, fuck, thank God I'm alive today. Thank God I'm alive to taste the ocean today. Thank God I'm alive to smell the fish soup and boiled shrimp today." And I think I'm going to end it there, because I believe if you're the kind of person to rag on Mark Kozelek and just call him a grumpy old man, I highly urge you to check out this record. You may not love it, you may not even like it, or you may not even tolerate it to begin with, but this is definitely worth delving into for the reasons I have stated. And hopefully it will give you a new perspective on what he's trying to do. There's no one else making music like this. And that's not to say, that automatically makes it good. But I can't think of any other artist right now that's so dedicated to a single idea and just pursuing it. This is one of the most interesting musical evolutions we have seen in many, many years. This is a very Tom Waitian evolution for Mark Kozelek, and I think in the years to come we will look back on this period, this very, very prolific period in Mark's career, where we will acknowledge the sheer artistic vision that Mark is pursuing. You don't have to appreciate it, you don't have to like it, but it's definitely worth acknowledging, and it's definitely worth discussing. So for the people out there that just brush him off saying, oh, he's not like what he once was, he's lost his way, he's a waste of talent, please reevaluate his music. Give this album a shot, even though it's 90 minutes, even though it's a challenge for newcomers. This is an album worth discussing. So, those are my thoughts on Sun Kil Moon as a whole, especially as a new album. This is my dinner. If I had to rate it, I'd probably give it a 9 out of 10. It is one of my favourite records of the year. Potential album of the year material. It's definitely a dark horse contender for album of the year for me. I just love this record for so many reasons. All the reasons stated. It's beautiful, it's heartwarming, sad at times, but also incredibly funny. I think Mark is the funniest he's been in a long time, especially on Linda Blair, where he's impersonating Linda Blair from The Exorcist, where there's just like a 30-second passage or a minute passage where he's like, it's so ridiculous, but so funny. I appreciate the risks that Mark is taking. It's a very diverse record. It's a very versatile record. It's funny, it's sad, it's beautiful, it's cozy, and it's just incredibly comforting and incredibly, incredibly, incredibly special in its artistic merit. Those have been my thoughts. Those have been the records I've been listening to over the past month. And now you're probably sick of my voice. So I will pass it on to my good man, Connor Bryant. Insert transitional music.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I know. I'm great. You didn't have to say it, though. I already know. I'm lame. Good afternoon, evening, good night, oh no, what's the Truman Show quote? If I don't see you tomorrow, good morning, good evening, and good night. Sorry, this is why I do film. Hello, listeners. This is the Connor part of the podcast where I chat to you guys about the albums that I've been listening to this week that I'm excited to talk about. Just like to give a little background on myself. I listen to music relatively obsessively. And whilst I consider myself to have absolutely no time at all for anything, music seems to be the one thing I do have a lot of time for. So obviously I go to work a lot, and when I go to work, I have about an hour's journey on a train, hour's journey back. So I managed to cram in a shitload of listening, and especially this year, I've been trying to listen to a bunch of 2018 releases, which has been. It was nightmarish beforehand, but then I put together a playlist over on Apple Music. Follow me at Con_Bryant if you feel like it. I put together a playlist of just everything I needed to catch up on, and it was about a month ago. I went through so many albums, but obviously I listen to other stuff as well. I go back and I revisit albums that I love, or I listen to older albums, or I get recommended things, not just by Josh, by other friends too. So, I get through a fair amount of albums. But I thought today I'll take you guys through 5 albums I've been listening to recently. And whilst I don't think we're going to be doing themes all the time, I thought I'd break it down into sort of sections. So the first album I'm actually going to start off with is I want to sort of break this into an album that I think I found out on Twitter through, I want to say it was Sargent House or Death Wish. I cannot remember which label. I think it's on Death Wish, but I found out about it through one of the Twitter, one of those Twitter pages for the record company, and it's an album that I've really not been hearing a lot of people talk about, within social circles or on the infamous Facebook group PMC, and that is an album by a band called Gouge Away, and the album's called Burnt Sugar, and it's a really, really good sort of fast-paced punk rock album with female vocals, and it kind of mixes a lot of stuff like sort of noise rocky. Like I get influences of like Sonic Youth in there, but then I also like see like it's a lot of post-hardcore stuff. It also reminds me of the type of stuff that Swain was doing with their album Howl. It reminds me a bit of that. Like the bass just like cuts through. It's thick, it's heavy, it's fuzzy. I wouldn't say the production's as good as Howl is, because Howl was produced by Kurt Ballou, and that man is just, as soon as he touches something, it's gold. It's golden. It's just great. But it to me is quite an underrated record. I wouldn't say it's like in my top 20 or anything for this year, but it's just an album that not a lot of people are talking about. And I think it's an album that deserves a little bit of recognition, because I think they're quite a small band, and I really they piqued my interest with this album, and I'm kind of excited to see where they go next. It's only like 27 minutes long, I think, so it's a really really short listen, really punky, in your face. Like the title track on there I think is about 4 minutes long, and it's like one of the longest songs on the album. And it's just it's really really nice. There's some really catchy melodies. Like I was saying, the bass lines just like sort of punch you in the face. The drums are like really really fast. It's just hardcore, aggressive punk music. And I've always found that female vocals are quite nice when paired with punk music and sort of harsher, extremer music. If anyone's listened to Oathbreaker, that's a good example. Rolo Tomasi, I think that they bring something to harsher genres that doesn't take away any of the edge. It doesn't like soften it. Like it just feels even more intense, because they can reach higher notes within an extreme voice. And so, if you're into some punk music, if you're into some hardcore punk, and you want to check out a new band that's actually doing some cool stuff, I wouldn't say it's necessarily like reinventing the wheel, but it's a really good listen. But there's a particular song on there, and I think it may be the title track, that reminded me of so much of like Sonic Youth, and it had been a while since I'd listened to Daydream Nation, so that was the next album that I listened to. I don't know what I can say about this album that hasn't kind of already been said. For a long time, Sister was my favorite Sonic Youth album, but Daydream Nation seems to be the one that I always just come back to, and it is a fan favorite, and it is considered their best album, and rightly so, to be honest. Like it's just absolutely incredible the way that they work with these 7 minute long tracks, rather than the sort of 4 or 5 minute long sort of pop-ish tracks they were doing before and subsequently afterwards. It leaves that time to like sort of brood and build out these noisy scapes like into 6-7 minute long tracks, but then all the choruses just absolutely like go insanely hard. I think about like Cross the Breeze, and that sort of like breakdown moment of just like the guitars and the drums, like Steve Shelley on drums just absolutely tearing it up in that song. But then, like before it, like when you just got like that guitar that's going bing, 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 and then it just dun 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 dun. It's absolutely fucking wonderful. But then, like I think it's got such a strong album opener. Like Sonic Youth have always been great with album openers, and I think Teenage Riot is just such a great start to an album. I think like the guitars like have such a distinct tone, and then it just moves on to that really really great verse of just like the stormy weather line, just like how it just like progresses through that song. It being 6 minutes long. You've got Silver Rocket on there. You've got the last three tracks that are like split into three. Hyperstation is just so great. But yeah, I seriously recommend, if you haven't listened to Daydream Nation, or if you've never listened to Sonic Youth, Daydream Nation is absolutely fantastic. I'd say if you've never listened to Sonic Youth, Goo is probably the best place to start. But Daydream Nation is just... It's a classic for a reason. It's technically a double album. I think it's about 75 minutes long. Absolutely fantastic listen. Noise rock, pop, noise pop. I think Sonic Youth kind of created that noise poppy type thing, coming from like no wave into creating this pop music in like infused noise rock, I was about to say Kim Deal, and that's not right. That's Pixies. Kim Gordon. Kim Gordon on bass and vocals. Like, fuck. Like, absolutely one of the most iconic vocalists in this genre. Like, absolutely great. And then you got Thurston Moore, of course, and Lee Ronaldo, I think is his name. God, I'm really blanking on these names today. Just doing some absolutely noisy and wild shit on the guitar. Like, I was looking up, like, how to play some of this stuff. And whilst it's not like necessarily complicated, the tunings are absolutely ridiculous in these guitars. They've got tunings of just like fucking nearly every strings being like G. They've got like F sharp tunings, like really just weird stuff going on. And like it almost changes throughout song to song. Like nothing's in like E or drop D. Like everything's bizarre, but like it just makes for some really nice sounding guitars. Like when they're just like really heavy on reverb, they sound fucking gorgeous. But then as soon as they whack on those fuzz pedals, it just sounds distorted and noisy and just like and guttural. Like I love it. Daydream Nation, absolutely a classic record. Absolutely something that everyone should listen to, especially if you're into punk, especially if you're into noise rock, especially if you're into pop music and everything else that I've said. Next album is a brand new 2018 album that is like the most disappointing or like one of the worst albums I've listened to this year. I don't think it's a horrible album, but like I tend to ignore bad music a lot of the time because I don't have time for that shit. I barely have time for good music. But there are certain bands out there that I will always listen to their new material no matter what because I love their old material a lot. One of those bands is The Prodigy. I think Music for the Jilted Generation is one of my favorite albums of all time. I think it's absolute like fucking tour de force, if I'm going to be pretentious and use that phrase, in electronic music, in house music, in dance music. I think it's absolutely fucking wonderful. And if you can go listen to that album and you don't want to fucking dance or you don't want to just like move your head to absolutely how banging those beats are, there's something not right with you. Like, and I hate saying that because obviously opinions are opinions, but my God, it's such a amazing record, and to me, I think it is Prodigy's best. And then obviously they took a long break after like Fat of the Land era stuff or Always Outnumbered stuff, and around that time, you know, drum and bass became big, Pendulum became big, all of those bands, dubstep had come out. So then like when they release Invaders Must Die, as much as I think that's a good record, they adopted this big punky like drum and bass like heavy sound with like heavy like compression, lots of punky vocals from I'm losing it with names, Maxim Reality and Keith Flint, but they were very chorus heavy. They were very verse chorus type songs with like a big beat behind them, and it was good. But then they followed it up like years down the line with The Day Is My Enemy, and The Day Is My Enemy is it's just not good. It's really boring, and it's just more of the same, but not as anywhere near well written as Invaders Must Die was. And then so I decided, you know what? No Tourists, their brand new album. It's short. It's come out like 2 years after The Day Is My Enemy. I'll give it a go. So I'll see what's happening. I didn't listen to any of the tracks leading into it. And yeah, just a total disappointment again. Now, there are elements of it that I like, and the elements of it that I like is where Liam Howlett, like the main producer behind The Prodigy, is going back to his roots and like incorporating so many of the stuff that like built the genre, built that rave culture, and built these big beats that I love so much from Music for the Jilted Generation. And those are the bits that shine because he takes those elements and brings it to the present day. It doesn't sound like something from the 90s. It sounds like something from 2018, but he's using these elements that like have like an element of nostalgia to them, but like makes them contemporary. And that's the bits of the album that like really shine for me. But then every other time he dips into the big drum and bass sections, or like really, really redundant, boring, like verse chorusy type stuff. Oh god, it's so boring. It's not painful listen. I never felt myself like getting angry at it or being like, this is shit. But it's just another disappointing release from the Prodigy, and I just feel like Liam Howlett is such a great producer, has so much in him to give, and he just keeps putting out this drum and bass electronic music, and it feels stale. Say what you will about Aphex Twin and his newer stuff, but like I feel like he's continuing to push himself. He's continuing to experiment further with the sound. 2018, like Aphex Twin does not sound like the Aphex Twin from like even 4 years ago. Like he's constantly pushing himself and doing weirder things, whether you like it or not. But like Liam Howlett is just stuck on this like drum and bass sound, and everything that comes off No Tourist, or a lot of the stuff that comes off No Tourist, sounds like it could have come from the Invaders Must Die era, fucking 7 years ago at this point. I think, no, even more than that, 10 years ago. Now that album came out, and it's such a dated sound now. Like drum and bass is such a dated sound. I mean, you can do good things with drum and bass, but No Tourists is just flat. It's just not good. So it was massively disappointing for me, I think, those first Prodigy out. There's a reason why he's called the Prodigy. It's because, like, he was fucking young and he was making this amazing music. And sure, that's really braggadocious to name yourself the Prodigy, but he had every right to. And the problem is that now he can't live up to that name of being the Prodigy. Two other albums that I'd like to talk about. I'm going to go with an album that I kind of ignored for a while. Nick Drake, Pink Moon. An album I ignored for a long time. I actually was going to listen to it like way back in 2016. I went on like sort of a Pink Floyd binge, and I was like, oh, I'm really in the mood to listen to some just like classic 70s music. And it wasn't until recently that, a mate of mine and a friend of the show, who goes by the name of Alex, it's one of his favourite albums, and he was just like, you gotta listen to it. I was like, you know what? Fuck it, I've got the time for an album that's only 27 minutes long. I knew it was going to be just like sort of folky guitar stuff, and my first listen, I wasn't exactly blown away by it. This is an album that has a lot of hype. But goddamn, that second listen, that third listen, that just keeps bringing you back. The lyrics, the hooks, the sort of way that he writes a song, they're like really, really short and to the point. But his guitar playing is just, it's like, it feels like a melting pot. Like, it feels just soothing. It's like hot oil, like, just kind of just oozes like this. I don't know how to even describe it. There's just so many great bits of guitar playing on this album, but it's not like flashy. It's not like Steve Vai or someone, or like even David Gilmour. Like, it's not like in your face. It's like, look how well I can play the guitar. It just seems like it's a man sat on a stool and he's just playing and playing like the final bits of his life, because obviously Nick Drake tragically died soon after this album. And as much as I don't necessarily find this to be a depressing record, or one where you can feel like this is his last record, when you put it in context, it feels like this is just a man that, like, at the height of his talents, and clearly got an issue with depression, or an issue with drugs, or just an issue with something. And especially on tracks like Parasite, where it's just it feels very, very self-reflective. It's just like right from that fucking first song. I think that's what like got in my head and encouraged me to sort of re-listen to it, was just that one phrase, Pink Moon, just like in his really, really odd but gorgeous voice, just that Pink Moon is on his way, and just like that just got like stuck in my head, and I just wanted to keep coming back to it, and it was just so many of the little guitar bits, like the like so wonderful to just listen to. It's like, see, I wouldn't count this album as like easy listening, but it is really easy to listen to. Like, there's nothing necessarily challenging about this album, unless like you obviously don't get along with the vocals. But it's, it's really talented guitar playing. There's supposedly a lot of different tunings, a lot of experimental tunings for the time, and it just comes across as just a really, really well written, concise album. So if you're into folk, if you're into singer-songwriter stuff, and if you're into guys that like being sad, yeah, Nick Drake's Pink Moon. Like, it's a classic for a reason. It's a classic for a reason. I think the last thing I'm going to talk about is one that I listened to like a couple of days ago. Came out on the 2nd of November, so it's a very, very recent album. That's Tenacious D's new album, Post Apocalypto. I've got a fair amount of things to say about this one. I have not watched the sort of animated TV show that goes along with it that they uploaded to YouTube that Jack Black wonderfully drew himself on Microsoft Paint. But it's not even animated, it's just like a series of like stills. But it looks fucking trashy and wonderful and everything that I love about Tenacious D. Like, they're like the ultimate cult band. There's no way you can listen to a song of theirs and not kind of just like crack a smile. But I haven't watched it. But I wanted to see how the album stands on its own, as much as like, it's kind of like a soundtrack and an accompaniment to the sort of mini series that's on YouTube. A lot of the album is built up of skits from that, so you get a sense of what the story is anyway. It's a comedy album, it's got a lot of tracks on it, but I thought I'd listen to the album, because I like me some Tenacious D, I like me some, I like funny shit, and that is kind of bottom line what I get with it. It's not good, like, actually, I'll take that back. There are elements of it that are fucking weirdly wonderful, like actual bits of like nuggets of musical greatness in there. But the story is so fucking ridiculous and so fucking stupid. The comedy is very, very surface level, but it still does kind of make you chuckle at bits at how ridiculous it is. And I think if you're into Jack Black's humor, you might get a good laugh out of it. But ultimately, I think I was reading up about this. There's about 19 or 18 minutes worth of music on this, and it's a half an hour album. So 11 minutes of the track list is made up of like these skits, pretty much all voiced by Carl Gass and Jack Black. And so it is kind of underwhelming because there's really not a lot of music here, and every time that there's like an ounce of something that's good, they've got Dave Grohl on drums, for fuck's sakes, and they just don't utilize it. Like, there's like, even from the opening track or the theme, like, there's something there, and it's like a 38-second long song, and a lot of the songs are just like referencing things, or like talking about pussy, talking about dick, poop humor. And at points it's really funny, and then at other times it's like, oh god, this is tiring. Like, it's 15 years into your career, and it's just like, it's the same sort of surface level jokes. I know they're kind of like going up a notch because it's like post-apocalypto is in a lot of reference to how 2018's going, and like with Trump being president and stuff like that. But it's not exactly smart humor. But I also don't think that's a terrible thing. Now, I'm not going to shit on this album because I don't think it's awful, and I do. There are definitely bits where, like, when I was walking and listening to this in public, it was hard to like keep a straight face at some bits. And I think a shining moment, if you're going to listen to any track off this album, the track "Making Love" is both fucking hilarious and actually goddamn gorgeous. Like, the song starts like because like fucking Jack Black's having a dream about like a girl giving him a beej, as he calls it, and it then just stems into this whole like ridiculousness of him like not feeling ready to have sex with this woman because he's not in love with her. But then this other woman like comes along and says the same thing, and like it builds into this crescendo with like string sections and everything, and it's just kind of weirdly wonderful, and I'm not even sure why, but it's so fucking funny. And like the moments where he's like encouraging Kyle with like Kyle's partner, and it's just like the back and forth and their voice acting in it is just, it's fucking hilarious. It's actually well written, and the sort of climax, without, if you pardon the pun, of the song is, it's really nice to listen to. It's really fucking weird, but that to me is like the highlight of the album, and that's about like 5 tracks in, maybe. But yeah, I think if you're into comedy albums, if you're into Tenacious D, like at least like the majority of the population were when they were like 13, 14, maybe 15, definitely give it a shot, because like, who knows, it might do it. Maybe this might do more for me once I've seen the animation, but I can't say I had a bad time listening to it. Like, I find it funny, I guess, but there are a few nuggets amongst what is essentially, if you're listening to just the album, what is essentially a radio play with some musical sound bites that are just kind of like half baked. But do check out the song Making Love, because it's fucking wonderful. It's really fucking good. Other than that, though, I have listened to a lot more albums than that, but those albums I'm still kind of stewing with. They're 2018 releases, and I kind of want to save my thoughts on a lot of 2018 releases, because obviously towards the end of the year we're likely to do a countdown of our favourites and our not so favourites and stuff like that. So that's just like sort of a little album roundup of what I've been listening to this kind of couple of weeks. It'll be interesting to see what Josh talks about, other than Sun Kill Moon and Mark Koslek and the drunk band. I don't hate Sun Kill Moon. I can't. I just can't. Anyway, time for me to go. I've got coffee to drink and things to do. Listen to more music. Love music. Love yourselves. Have a good evening. And if I don't see you tomorrow, have a good morning, good evening, and good night. Truman Show, 1998. Great movie. Goodbye.